IVM.
100 episodes, a milestone to celebrate, and a reason to reflect. In the last 2 years, you have supported and critiqued me and made Postcards from Nowhere what it is today. Thanks to your love, we have made it to the podcast charts in over 25 countries. As we travel together, your love gave me the space to concretize my thoughts on the reason and purpose behind the show, and maybe somewhere, my reason to travel. So instead of your regular episode, this week, I give you a glimpse into the person beyond the show. In a freewheeling conversation with Chuck, the host of Getting Meta, I speak of all things travel, of how there are no new destinations, the 3 things you need for a memorable trip, slow travel as self-discovery, and why travel so deeply attracts me in the first place. Beyond that, I speak of how to go about finding what to do with your life, and the key thing which drives me at work, life, and with Postcards from Nowhere. Indulge me, just like the way you have done for the last 2 years.
Utsav, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
I was just about to say, this is I think you and I have spoken to each other more times. I mean, we're each other's podcast buddies apart from our own solo podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Always a pleasure, man. I think, how many times have we come on Simplified?
4 times, I think.
4 times.
Yeah.
That's amazing. We had to wait for Tony to cross, get into 5th so that, he would, you wouldn't be the person with the 4th most simplified appearances. No, and this is amazing. When I put the idea for this show together, you were one of the first people who I actually wanted to speak to. And when I first told you, you expressed a lot of surprise, as I thought you would. But the reason for that is, I think, I look at it very simply this way, right? I think of which of my friends seem very sorted. And
I hate that word officially. You have no idea. That is the nickname my friends use for me, and I hate it to the core.
What do you prefer?
I just prefer being Utsav. I don't want to be anyone.
You don't need a label.
No.
But you know what I mean, right? You have always come across as somebody who, and please clarify this if I am wrong. Then we can learn about the fine art of deception from you. No, in the sense, you never looked like you were confused as to what you were doing. You always seem like an extremely optimistic guy, or
I am
grounded, realistic. And I mean, what shaped that? I mean, was it a conscious decision to be that way, or did something affect you, or did you grow up being that way?
I think one of the reasons I turned out optimistic as a person was, I think it's very personal in the sense that I lost my father when I was 10. Right. And of course, and it's going to sound completely horrible, but the good thing about losing your parents so early is you don't understand the ramifications of it. Right. When you're 10 years old, you don't really understand what losing a parent beyond the emotional aspect of it is. Right. But as I grew up, I sort of understood that even after that, I am so privileged in the sense that the fact that I had a great education, I had a great sibling, great parent, other parent to look after me, and I got pretty much to do whatever I wanted to do, right? I think that really, really made me sort of, count my blessings every day. And I know people say that you should count your blessings every day, but you really should, because, and if 2020 hasn't been an eye-opener for all of us, but you should, because you then realize that you're with so much privilege that you are standing at the top of a mountain already.
Yeah.
Right. And if that doesn't make you optimistic, I think nothing else will.
Yeah.
Right. Just recognizing your privilege and the advantages you have been born with, right? In a country like India, I think that itself makes me very optimistic about myself, if not the world around.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think, and that last line you said, actually, you have an optimism which is extremely grounded. Right? It's not like you're like, oh yeah, everything's going to be fine, everything's going to be great, and then you fly off. But you have this very grounded sense of optimism, right? And that whole point of privilege, I know, is something that you and I have discussed many, many times before. Recognize the privilege that you have. And let's face it, most of the people who are going to be hearing this, or at least understanding this language at least, which you're speaking in right now, do have some sort of privilege. And it's been an absolute eye-opener in the COVID and seeing what others are going through. I mean, I'll find it very difficult. I still find it shocking that there are people who don't wake up to that sense of privilege. Why do you think that is? I think you have a better sense you have your finger on the pulse of this country way more than I do. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that there are still people like us who are still unsympathetic, for example, or don't recognize their privilege?
I think it's a lot to do with this concept in anthropology and sociology, which we talk about in groups and out groups. Right now, fundamentally, we all define our lives within groups, which means that we are essentially moving around people who we consider part of as a group are pretty much like us. Right? So you feel that everyone's on a level playing field, right? But the moment you peer outside your out group and you realize that you are certainly not on a level playing field, you're way ahead of most people. Right? So for me, one of those examples was when I went to engineering, I went to an NIT, right? And which meant that I had students from every single part of the state. I knew someone whose parents made 35,000 rupees a year, right? And for me, that was shocking because I used to probably get, 2,500 rupees a month just to spend outside of my mess and hostel. Right? And then you suddenly realize that how much privilege do you have? Right? And I think that is where the problem is, that the in-grouping is so strong. Now, that in-grouping could be nationality, could be caste, could be class, could be even a small city versus a big city.
Could be a housing society.
Right? And that is where we lack the ability to see our own privilege.
And COVID unfortunately has exacerbated that more than anything else. You're going to have a bunch of kids who never have that experience that you do. And in many ways, I've kind of gone through sort of like the same thing, but in two completely opposite, in both directions, actually. I grew up in the Gulf. I had a peer group that was extremely rich, like way richer than I was. And I always they would have the latest video games where I would still be like 3 generations back or something. So I was always very conscious of that at that point in time. But at the same time, when I came to India, which was after 2010, nothing really, 2000 actually, after my 10th, nothing had really changed really in terms of income. But then when I went to engineering college over here, I realized that, wow, okay, even with that, I am actually at a level that's way above, income-wise, exposure-wise, everything-wise. So just, having seen a little bit more of the world. And I think both those experiences, both having the humility because you were poor, air quotes, and because you were rich. I think that really ended up shaping a lot of, and of course I'm from Kerala, which helps shapes a lot of other things as well. But I think that's great. I think this was a totally unscripted beginning to this conversation. I have a feeling it's going to segue very nicely into both major topics that we're going to be talking about. So when I think of the term market research, a few things immediately pop up into mind. Your name being one of them, and at least in my head, and I'm pretty sure for a lot of others, in our peer group, and for all those listening who Utsav was my junior, should have been batchmate at Mudra Institute of Communications, Ahmedabad, a premium communications-oriented business school in northern India. And
Western India, but you're from Kerala, so I'll give you
fair enough. Yeah. Oh, I used to think that Bombay and Delhi were like next door to each other. And sometimes even though I consider myself reasonably good with geography, sometimes I look at the map and I still am so astonished by a few very specific facts. One, Chennai and Bangalore are almost at the same level. Hyderabad is closer to Indore than it is to Bangalore. All these facts, right, sometimes just absolutely blow my mind. And maybe it's because I grew up in a country that was super tiny, Bahrain, and now I've spent 10 years in Bombay, which is, I don't know what to make of this. But yeah, what I was saying was many people in our educational peer group will also attest to the fact that, you are a fan of market research, really.
Absolutely.
So let's start off with that, because I find that fascinating in many ways. Not too many people I know are fans of what they do. Sometimes they end up liking their work, but I've hardly come across somebody who's as passionate about their work as you are. So I think there's a lot of stuff over there to unpack, but for many people hearing, while I would urge you to go back and listen to the simplified episode that we did with Utsav, where he deconstructed what market research is. 2 minutes, if you had, would you tell us what MR really is?
Okay. The first thing to know about MR is to not think of market research, right? To think of a more fundamental thing, which is to understand why is someone doing what they're doing, right? And that is a very, very useful skill in life to have, irrespective of what you are doing in life. Right? Whether you have a job, or you are an entrepreneur, or you're an academician, the need and the ability to understand people is very, very high, right? And to me, fundamentally, all market research boils down to answering that why we do what we do, right? And to me, that is what really all research is about. You can use different methods. You can do passive data, active data, whatever.
Those are methods. Those are
all methods, right? But ultimately, it's about answering that question. And right. And when we talk about an insight, which we talk about both in marketing and research terms, that insight has to be very fundamental. It has to be a fundamental truth.
Yeah.
Right. And it has to be a truth which, when you listen to it, it should be obvious.
Yeah. That's what an insight is supposed to be. Right?
Exactly. It's a beautiful insight. It has to be very obvious to you. Like, of course, I knew this, but it didn't occur to me.
Yeah, not in those words.
Correct. So the idea is that the conventional market research, of course, is used for brands to take decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But to me, the underlying layer is to understand people. Right. And to me, that is a great skill to have for anyone.
Fair enough. It seems to me like this is something that you get into and then realize that you like it. On the other hand, you seem like somebody who's very keen on getting into it from the beginning. So what kind of shaped that? How did you figure out that this is what you want to do? Especially, and I ask this especially since you come from such a strong first principle sort of approach to market research, right? It's not about the tools. It's not about, I'm great at math, so I think I'll be good at quant, for example. You're approaching it very fundamentally from, I want to understand human beings, therefore market research, which seems very logical, but also seems incredibly mature for somebody who hasn't heard of market research just yet. So I'm very keen to know about that.
So I think I probably take it back to growing up in a small town somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think a lot of people feel that, sometimes when you come from a small town, you have disadvantages. I think they have massive advantages. Right, especially if you have privilege. Okay, I think that's important to call out.
And for those unaware, that small town in your case would be Anand, right?
Anand in Gujarat, right? So I had privilege. I went to a great school, right? But I think the fundamental thing which drives research or whatever else I do is this innate curiosity about things around me, right? And I think that came from small town because you are itching to see the world,
right?
Right. We grew up in a generation where we realized there is a lot out there. Our parents maybe did not,
right?
Right. I had access to television. I had access to cable television. I could see there is so much out there. Right. And for me at that time, satisfying your curiosity would just be, taking an annual summer vacation because that was the only way you got. But when I went to a school, I had a fantastic library. I think few schools even today can boast of the library we had back in our school.
In Anand.
Right. In Anand. Right. And to me, that became a very, very significant driver of whatever I wanted to do. Right. So for example, even when I was in engineering and I hated it from day one, right. I decided that, I will start pitching myself and start talking to do something else.
Sure.
Right. So I somehow got in touch with the city supplement of Times of India, so Surat Times. Right. I actually wrote for them for 2 years. Right. That's how I earned my first paycheck. Right. It meant nothing. It was just very satisfying to get that 400 rupees for an article at that point in time. But to me, the idea was that, I want to try something else. Right. And that has been a constant theme everywhere to satisfy that curiosity. Now, of course, because of the upbringing you have, those curiosities can go in different ways.
Yeah.
One way of taking a curiosity is really getting into, news, gossip, and that whole space of things.
Yeah.
The other thing is that, how can I understand what is happening around me in a better way, even if it is only 1% better every day?
Yeah.
Right. So that is where it all started for me. And even today in my head, I think of myself as a small town person.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Even though I have come very, very far away from that world, but that mental makeup somewhere is still there.
Yeah.
That desire to make sense of things around me is still very much there.
Mm-hmm. I know what you mean. I mean, I didn't think that I would draw this parallel, but I feel you in many ways, as they say. I still have spent, I suppose, right now, this is around a third of my life in Bahrain, which was a fairly small country. And not just that, getting around was also very difficult. So was pretty much confined to home all the time and couldn't go out, meet friends, etc. because no public transport and all that. So ended up spending a lot of time. But I'm also it might be a little too early for me to say something that might end up being an autobiography or something. But I feel like all the flaws that we thought we had as kids were actually our strengths. And somehow I have a feeling you might agree with that as well. Like there's some of the things that I thought, maybe this is, I can't point to specifics right now. It's just a thought I had somewhere in my head. Is one of those random things that you write down on Google Keep when, you're drunk at 11 and you think, this is a profound thought. And then you scribble it down. Next day you wake up and like, what is this? And that sounds like it'll be an interesting title for chapter 4 of the autobiography or something. But I think there is some wisdom to that in the sense that, when you're young, you always have this wantingness to move towards the mean and fit in with at least the cool kids and all that. But then you realize that irons out all the things that make you in some way. Does that, if that makes sense? I know it sounds a little cheesy or profound, but I really think there is something over there. And when you were saying that, it just resonated a lot. And the willingness to action on it, I think that's the other thing to take away from what you said. I just love that, how you just jumped at it and got your first paycheck for something like that. I think that is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think because I had privilege, that paycheck was never the motivation.
Yeah.
Right. The paycheck was a great, oh yes, awesome, I have extra money. Which college kid does not have extra money?
Yeah.
Right. But I think to the question of what we think of our weaknesses are our strengths, I think what really happens is, I'll just take a short thing into, this something which I was reading is that there are no new destinations, only new ways of seeing.
Wow. Wonderful.
Okay. So I think that's also with you as a person, right?
Yeah.
It's about how you see that particular trait of yours.
Yeah.
Right. Now, at some level, I am always dissatisfied with what I do.
Mm-hmm.
That can either be an amazing thing or it can be a terrible thing.
Yeah.
It's just how you take it and what you make of it is what really defines it.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes of all time is by a fellow diver. When Divya and I had gone on a honeymoon to Bali for the first time, and we went to a particular slot, and also, we were very amateur divers at that point of time, like 4 or 5 dives and all, and there was a very experienced Russian guy with us, right? And that area was famous for this huge fish called the mola, and he said he's dived there 5 times already. So we made the mistake of asking him, and see if you can spot the mistake in this, because it goes back to what you were saying. We asked him, oh yes, we're doing the same dive again. And then he looked up at us holding his huge camera, and he censured us with his eyes. He wagged his finger and said, there is no same dive. We're doing the same dive spot. Each dive is different. Like, wow, that's actually great life advice. Which makes me think like, yeah, every time you hear a song, there's something different. You're not hearing the same thing again. But I think I think we'll end up veering off into lots of our travel anecdotes like this, even before we start talking about travel proper. So I understand what drew you to market research, and we've had some amazing conversations around this, and anecdotes and stuff that you've told me around the things that you have discovered about people, yourself, the country. Could you share some of those stories? I know you've told this to me 1,000 times, but I want to hear that story again, and you know which one I'm talking about.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the first month at my first job at Kantar MRB, and we have a week or two dedicated to going out into the field, right? Which essentially means that this is, by the way, 2010, when most of the surveys were still done on pen and paper, right? And our task was to, find within a span of 4 hours, find and interview 2 condom users, right? And first of all, the thing is that you given that survey and you are like, listen, I barely talk about this topic to my friends, right? You are expecting me to go into a mall, find a rank stranger, and ask him ki kya sir aap condom use karte hain? Like, do you use a condom, right? And I'm like, how am I supposed to do this, right? And they were like, okay, why don't you just give it a shot? Okay. And they helped me with a couple of tips to start a conversation, right? And you come back and tell us what to do after 4 hours. Okay. I was like, okay, great. So I went there. I remember I went to Galleria in Powai, for those who live in Bombay. And I think for the first good 30-45 minutes, I just couldn't approach anyone. I was feeling so conscious and awkward, right? One, it's talking to a complete stranger. Second, it's a taboo topic in India, right? And then what happened is that, I somehow managed to, go and speak to one guy. And I'm talking to him, and, he starts talking to me very nicely, and he opens up a little bit. He's having his smoke, enjoying his, evening break and stuff. And then we had a question, right, which said that, why do you prefer a certain brand of condom, right? So, he starts off with the most rational reason you will expect, is that, oh yeah, it's an international brand, it's safe, and, I feel, at peace when, I'm using this, right? But then, and we were having a nice chat. He was looking me into the eye and he was talking. And then suddenly I see that his gaze is like on the floor. Okay. And very sheepishly, he says that, she likes the flavors. Okay. And to me, that was such a great moment for the simple reason that I was able to go talk to a rank stranger and ask him about something which I would have never thought. And he told me about something about so personal about his life, which I don't know how many of his friends know, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, that one of the greatest things which came out of that was the ability to talk to people.
Right.
Is one of the most underrated skills which is out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And to me, that was amazing because I went on to interview the next guy. And of course, we asked these questions of, what pack size you buy and how many times you buy that pack. So this guy says that, I buy a pack of 20. Okay. So, and I'm supposed to just record whatever the person says. Okay. And this next question was, how often do you do that? He said thrice a week. Okay. And I am in my head, I am doing the math 20 into 360. What is this guy doing in his life? Right. And see, we were always sort of, told that there will be a overclaiming and underclaiming in these kind of categories, right? But you don't realize it till you see it happen in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think in any other time, I would have just laughed on his face.
Yeah.
Right. But I think I kept my composure and I went ahead with the interview, knowing that I will have to go and probably discard this interview at the end of
some point.
Entire thing.
Yeah.
Right. But to me, that became a great way to really, understand that how do people behave? What do people say? Why do they say things? What kind of posturing people do? Why do they do it? And that is what really got me hooked into it. Right. So yes, all the survey and data is fine. But the insight does not come from looking at the data. The insight comes from going one level up and saying, why is this happening?
Why is this happening? Yeah, it goes back to those first principles in some way that you were talking about. I'm sure you have many more such anecdotes and stories, and we can actually fill an entire episode with, or even start a new podcast on just that, I guess. But I want you to specifically tell me one that, if I may be Amit Verma-ish about this, one story that gave you despair and one story that gave you hope about, I don't know, the country, humanity at large. Like what you told me right now was like extremely heartwarming. It was like it was a window into like a person's soul in some way, and gives me confidence that, hey, if Utsav, who is, who's been in this field for so long, he stumbled into this, right? The first thing that he did, and he was as nervous as I possibly would be, then we can all then take that first step ourselves, as long as our hearts are in the right place, etc. But I want to know if there are any other stories like this that have had like a more profound impact on you beyond just, that moment itself, which kind of made you pause and think, wow, our country is like really screwed, or wow, humanity is really great. Has there been any moments like that for you?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the moments which I distinctly remember is...
You might want to start with the negative one first, just so we end on...
Okay, sure. So this was in Bombay, and we had gone interviewing for an FMCG kind of a category, right? And we were interviewing the, mother-in-law. And one of the questions which you often ask is that, who's the decision maker and is there an influencer or not, right? And so what you're trying to understand is that apart from the mother-in-law, does the daughter-in-law have a say or not?
Right.
Okay. And in that interaction,
what kind of family was this?
Fairly well-to-do. Yeah. So a 3 BHK house in Bombay.
Yeah. Okay, fair. Yeah, that's well-to-do.
Let's just define it that way, right? Yeah. So, or rather, I must say 2 balconies in the house.
Wow. Okay.
And we were talking, and in the conversation, which of course was largely focused on the survey, but also went in other places. She said something which really made me sad that day, when she said that I am the one who decides in the house because mera haath hamesha upar rehna chahiye.
Wow.
And I think men are to a very, very large degree responsible for the state of women in the world.
Wow.
But to some extent, there are women too who are responsible for it.
Yeah.
Right?
I know what you mean. That makes me even sadder, right?
Yeah. And I am like, this family is well-to-do and educated. Right. But this mindset is so deeply entrenched that there is an inherent power equation, and I am required to dominate in this power equation in something as simple as what is going to get bought in the house.
Wow.
Right. And that made me really sad. And I am like, we have such a long way to go as a society. And if
the so-called echelons of society are acting like this. Yeah, let's quickly move on to the more positive one, because I'm sure you have filled with stories like that as well.
Yeah. There was another one which happened once we were interviewing. I had a client which was a radio station, right? And we often used to go and work with younger people. And again, this was a very interesting contrast to the story I've just told you. is that, we often ask questions to young people about, what are their aspirations and stuff like that, right? And this girl, we were talking to her. It was just me and one more lady interview with me. And there was no one else in the house that time. And, typically when we talk to teenagers, they often talk about, money or going somewhere or getting a great job. The only thing she said is that my only aim to earn money is that I want to get my mother out of this house. That is the only single driving force in my life, because I know how she's treated here. And she deserves a much, much better life. And I'm the one who's going to give it to her.
Wow.
And, it was not said from a sense of trying to appear the right thing to say anything. Yeah. It was just very genuine and heartfelt. And that just gave me so much hope. And this happened within a gap of like 6-7 months, right? These two incidents. And I was like, this is just so much, so uplifting to think of things like that.
Yeah, to me, and I somehow had a feeling that this would happen when you before I asked you this question. But your the sadder story was from like the upper end of society, and in many ways, your more uplifting story was not from from the upper side. And I think there are so many of those stories, in where you least expect them in many ways, at least the more uplifting ones. And it's kind of heartening that these kind of things happen. So I want to move away from the stories by itself and just come back to market research and why it's been your career of choice. Because although I do hope that when people listen to this, they get a little inclined towards market research itself, but I'm hoping that this conversation will actually help them sort of choose a career itself. So why do you think you have got so much out of market research, or your chosen field rather, let me put it that way, while a lot of your contemporaries might not have? I think of many of my friends, and they have gone down certain paths or careers that they have either been passionate about one point of time, or they've been in for a long time, and they're ambivalent about I'm doing the same shit over and over again, or I'm doing this. I was passionate about it at one point, but how the system is. And why do you think you've one, lasted, and two, continue to be passionate about what you do? Was it something conscious? Is it I'm just very keen on knowing that.
Okay. So I think the reason why I have stuck around in this is because my desire to do this did not stem from making money, because as a matter of fact, agency pays are the worst, right? And even if you work on the client side on market research, you definitely get paid more than what you get on the agency side, right? And the reason why I've stuck around on the agency side is because it still ends up feeding my curiosity about things. Because in an agency side of things, you get to work on so many different things at the same time, right? In the same day, I could be working on OTT versus helping people understand youth attitude towards sexual health, to getting the next fintech app in, right? That itself gives me a great way to actually take insights from very, very different kinds of products, services, and brands and bring it into another category completely. Right? So my job actually, in a way, feeds my curiosity.
Wow.
Right? And I personally at least feel, and that's completely my bias, by the way, I recognize it, is that I don't think any other job would give me this satisfaction.
Fair enough.
Right? So that keeps me going. So on those bad days when, someone has given you a revision to your deck at 10 p.m. and it is due the same night, right? Yeah, you are able to get through to all this because you know that 80 to 90% of the time, this is awesome.
Yeah, you're passionate about what you're doing.
Passionate about what you're doing. Right?
You're I need to improve on what I've already done. That's an amazing space to be in.
Yeah. The second thing is that at some level, market research and its understanding cannot be very subjective. At some level, it does become objective. And that's what I like about it, that there is some sort of fundamental truth in it.
Yeah.
It's not about how I look at a creative versus how you look at a creative.
Yeah.
Right? It's about if this is statistically significant, it is statistically significant. There are no two ways about it.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's what attracts to me, because I feel that there is a fundamental truth in what I'm doing. Right? That truth may only come out 20% of the times, and 80% of the times it may not.
Yeah.
But to me, it gives me some sort of a compass, you can call it, some sort of a locus or a north pole, or a north star rather, to go back to and say that, this is what I want to. And it always keeps me grounded. Right? Sometimes you feel that, you start seeing noise in the data, right? You start seeing the patterns which are not there.
Yeah.
And then you take a step back and say that, with what conviction am I saying this? Right? And then after 5 minutes, you are like, I don't really have a lot of conviction. I should not write this on the slide.
Right.
So I think that's what has really kept me going in this space. And one good way to think about what you're doing is that in a positive way, do you sometimes think about your work outside of work? I am not saying that you should be stressed about your work. That's of course terrible. But suppose if you're tackling an interesting problem at work. I'll give you an example which happened just this last couple of weeks. I'm working for a campaign, a research project which is going to lead to a marketing campaign to identify people who are tossing out either cigarette stubs or garbage, but not properly, not disposing it out properly. And the idea was to identify them through a survey.
Okay.
How do you make someone report negative behavior? Right? You can just ask a question saying that, do you throw garbage? You'll be like, yeah, of course, no, I don't throw garbage. Right? Now, that was an interesting enough problem because it has so many dynamics of self-image. It has a dynamics of socially acceptable behavior.
Of remembering.
Of remembering your actual behavior, because we are known to suppress our own negative behaviors. Right? So how do I elicit that honest behavior of people into a survey and make them actually say that we were able to actually crack it? So I'm very happy about that. Right? So if you are able to think of your work outside of your immediate working hours or whatever it is, I think that's also a great way to think that, are you really enjoying what you're doing?
Yeah. I think for both research and creative fields, that makes sense, right? If you look outside your computer screen for a while and take inspiration from somewhere else, and it may come when you are not seeking that sort of inspiration. Yeah. There's always this joke in advertising that your best ideas come to you when you're on the pot or when you're high. And I think, or you're high on pot. But yeah, I know what you're saying. I think sometimes you just need to give your mind some space to breathe a little bit instead of always trying to, I need to find a solution for this in the next 5 minutes, and the best ideas might actually come at that point in time. And I think this is something that I've heard from several people in a spectrum that ranges from John Lennon to you. So I think that's
great. I feel bad for John Lennon. You rate him poorly.
That's true. But no, that's amazing. Just to close up this little bit on research and careers, and this is a fairly broad one. You can feel to answer it in any way you want. Really, suppose there was somebody who was like in 7th or 8th standard these days. Let's assume, for sake of simplicity, that he had sort of like the same privilege that we do in terms of, not necessarily having to worry too much about certain things, etc. Unfortunately or fortunately, I'm putting that filter in. Like, if they were confused about what to do, like what career to take up, should they just go with the flow and take up an engineering or something of that sort, or should they try exploring those creative skills that they had, etc.? Like, and let's assume again that there are no pressures to go down a particular path or something. You don't seem to me be that kind of guy who would say, no, you have to take this particular path or something like that, but you would ask the questions that would help that person answer these 5 questions, and then you'll figure out the career path that you want yourself. Like, do you have some questions like that? Which is, suppose a cousin who was in 7th or 8th standard came to you and asked, what should I do? What would you ask them to evaluate, think about?
I don't have it for 7th or 8th, but I have it for adults, because I have asked,
even better.
Yeah, so I have had a lot of friends.
When you say adults, you mean
people in their late 20s, early 30s.
Oh, all right, fair enough. Okay.
Yeah. I had a lot of friends who were sort of, come unstuck at a point saying that I don't know what I want to do next, or I don't know what I want to do with my life, right? And over time, what I've done is I've designed a series of questions.
Wow.
Which you answer, and over time, over 2-3 interactions, I try and help you narrow down to say that, okay, maybe these are the 5 things you will be good at, plus you will enjoy to some extent, and plus it is monetizable, right? Of course, the interest of it will be varied.
Yeah.
Right? For example, one of the questions I use is that describe an ideal day for whatever is your ideal day.
Yeah.
Right? Assume that there are no restrictions in the world. Describe your ideal day, and I make sure that it's an essay type answer and not a 2-line answer. Because what happens is that when you start thinking and when you start expressing, you yourself start discovering that what your ideal day is. Because I don't think a lot of people give it a thought.
Yeah.
We all have to have ideal moments.
Yeah.
But we don't have ideal days.
Yeah.
Right? And that is what helps me say that, okay, I can sort of think of this person as, liking to do X or liking to do Y. And then the analysis starts to, flow from there. That's just one of the techniques. I mean, there are, of course, other things I do. Again, there is no scientific research behind this method. This is just something I've figured out after talking to a lot of people, after teaching at Bombay University, and having had these questions from, students as well. But one thing I would recommend to any 7th or 8th grader is, if you have to answer that what you should do to be great at whatever you do later in life, it doesn't matter. The only thing which matters is that you go and experiment with whatever catches your interest. The whole question of, finding your passion and what is my true passion is bullshit for the simple reason that you can only discover something you enjoy when you keep trying.
Yeah.
And in that also there are two ways. One is that you like it and you become good at it. You start it and you realize in the process that you enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And both methods are perfectly valid. There is no aha moment, unfortunately, saying that, oh, this is my passion. I don't think anyone gets it. It somehow comes to you over a period of time. And it is very much a function of how much time you invest on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, so many things over there. Like, I mean, this whole finding your passion is pretty overrated in many ways. And what I've often kind of guessed and seen also is that people get into what they think is their passion, and the passion part, the actual passion part of their passion, as it were, is just a small percentage. They still have to go out and do the other ugly things like business development and sales and talking email and things. I've seen many freelancers fail as a result of that. I mean, they think they can just quit their job and all the work is great, but you still have to put in all the other work in terms of getting clients and managing your budget and all that. And suddenly you gain a lot of respect for your finance team, your HR team, who has and things like that. But that's amazing.
I just want to add one more thing to it, and I think the question is not what is your passion. The question should be, what are you willing to suffer pain for?
Wow. Wonderfully put.
Because if you are genuinely willing to suffer pain for something, which means giving up the good things in life, that is what really drives you.
Wow,
so wonderful. I think that's what we should really ask ourselves, that what am I willing to persevere for? What am I willing to suffer pain for?
You said you have these list of questions. Is there somewhere that if somebody is listening, they want to check them out? Is there somewhere that you put this up?
No, but I'm happy to share it with you if you want to host it somewhere, by all means.
I think by the time this show comes out, I think you should just convert all of it into a Medium post, or perhaps even Google Drive, a Google Form link or something. I think the responses to that itself might be very interesting insight for you. I
think the responses to that would help me write another 5 other posts of what ails young India.
Exactly. So whenever this show comes out, whoever's listening, just look into the show notes. If you see a link over there that says Utsav's 5 questions, then you have it. Otherwise, then just follow Utsav on his social handles, and whenever this thing does come out, it will be out. But no, that sounds amazing. And I am not at all surprised that you had a solid answer to that particular question, because there are some of these I put together thinking, this is something that we can talk about. This is something I know that he's probably has his notes ready. Unsurprisingly, when we just started this call and I got my list of questions out, I got my notes over here as well. Not at all surprised. There's lots more to discuss with Utsav, and we'll get to that right after this break.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Pulyabazi, Pranav and Saurabh talked to author Ghazala Wahab. They bust many myths surrounding Indian Islam. On Postcards from Nowhere with Utsav, discover the lifestyle of the lesser-known Gujar Bakarwals. On Speakeasy with Dheeraj, best-selling author Mainak Dar divulges how he gets so much done. On The Habit Coach, Ashton is joined by Daniel Lobo. He shares his journey of being a mental health advocate. And on Storytellers and Storysellers, Vinny talks to Hyderabad-based musician PK about her new song, You Don't Have To. Do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you enjoyed this show or any of our shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to spread the word about a podcast. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week: Ciet Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intuit India. We really do appreciate the support. You are what makes this possible.
And now back to my conversation with Utsav Mamoria. I think it's time to jump to your passion number 2, which is, of course, travel. So I'm going to ask you a question that I've never asked you before with respect to travel. What are 3 must-have accessories for somebody who is traveling? And I somehow have a feeling a camera is not going to feature on your list.
Okay. The first accessory which you need to have is patience.
All right.
Okay. Because my fundamental belief is we are trying to see the world too fast. We don't have the right lenses to look at it. Mm-hmm. And we are not giving ourselves the time to remember it and record it in our memories. Right. So the first and the most important toolkit, which by the way comes free of cost, is patience. Right. That's one thing I'll definitely have. The second thing I have is the ability to shed your biases. Okay. Because we have so many of them. If market has taught me one thing, that we have tons and tons of biases. We are all in some ways worse people than we think we are. No, I think we all have this self-awareness. I'm a good person.
I'm a good person.
Right? But there will be times you will look at your own actions and say, I'm actually not a good person. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have said that. So the first thing is to drop your biases, right? And do not go with these preconceived notions of wherever you're going, that this place is going to be X.
Yeah.
Be open enough to let the place surprise you. Right? And the third and the most important thing, which should be in any toolkit, is the ability to laugh at yourself. Because so many things will go wrong. You will make such ridiculously stupid decisions when you are traveling, right?
Yeah.
But don't let that get to you.
Yeah.
Don't let that pull you down, because some of them will make great stories, as they always will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But what essentially travel becomes, and it is to me in a very, very strong way, is all travel is self-discovery.
Yeah.
If you are reacting to something you are seeing and you are liking it or disliking it, tells you something about yourself more than about that place or that thing.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, those are the top three things. Having the best, most rugged pair of shoes, or having life straw to save water is always there, good to have. But to me, these are universal. These are beyond whether you are 18 or you are 80.
Yeah.
And this can be done with too much money and very little money.
That's great. And I'm delighted by that answer. Let me just put it that way. I'm like absolutely, and the more I think about it, it makes sense. Right? We do have a tendency to hyper plan, or something I've been very, very guilty of myself, and I think that goes nicely into what I really want to talk about under travel, which is something that you are a huge advocate of, which is slow travel, which is something I hadn't heard of before you espoused it. Although once you say it, it obviously does make it does make a lot of sense, and it kind of flows in from the three must-have accessories that you said. So I'll ask you the same two starting questions that I did for market research, which is one, what is it, for in case somebody who's unaware of what it is, and two, how did you get into it? Did you get into it consciously? Did your small town city life, a small town city life, have a role to play in that? So I'm just curious as to how you ended up. Did you very consciously get into it, or did something inspire you?
Okay. Slow travel is essentially a way to relook two things. One is time and other is space. Okay. Time in the sense, you don't need 3 months to do slow travel. Of course, if you have, great, nothing like it.
Yeah.
But you could also slow travel in one day. Right. The other thing which sort of goes together with this is how you look and navigate space around you. Right. For example, one of the things which most people don't do is they don't look up when they're walking in a city, because we are often looking into our phone, which is looking down fundamentally. Right. You can see so much about your own city if you just change the angle of viewing. That is true for as historical a city as Banaras to probably as new a city as some parts of Bangalore. Right. How you navigate time and space, and when you do it consciously, is what slow travel is. Like, I mean, for those who want to, get a sense of how this is, just go and check out the first episode of my podcast, Postcards from Nowhere, which is what is about slow travel. And I give you an example of slow traveling for 3 months and slow traveling for 10 minutes. Right. And how you can really do that within your own city. You don't even need to do anything. In fact, the slow traveling for 10 minutes requires you to go out of your house and go to the next four crossing or chalk. To your house, and that is what it is about. And how much can you learn about where you are and what you are living in for the probably a decade we have not thought of. If you could just do that, and that's what the essence of slow travel is.
I tried that once. I went on to my terrace and just looked around the space where I've been living. I've been living this building for 4 or 5 years before I tried this out, and I just looked around and I just looked at all the buildings and the juxtaposition of the old and new, and realizing that this place is actually greener, and within that greenery there is so much diversity in terms of the various trees that there are, noticed all the birds that are around, yet the industrial complex and then your mind starts forming these patterns, right? This is probably where people are. This is the old families, they're getting replaced by the new high rises. That's where the novo rich are going to be. There's a posh school right behind the posh offices, so there are families who probably drop their kids off over there and then say and they stay over here because all three are Oberoi. So yeah, I think that's a fascinating exercise to just try out in your head. And I remember one of the things that you said once, which I think one of the simplest tips that anyone could do, which is just stop and stare at a building and draw it or sketch it.
Sketch it.
Yeah.
And the reason is that the amount of detailing you will see in a sketch is way more than what you'll see in a photograph.
Yeah.
Because you don't spend that much time constructing a photograph before taking it.
Yeah.
Even if you are, let's say, a very serious photographer which uses professional equipment, right? So just give me a second.
I just process there. Okay. Yeah. No. When you said the sketching, it just reminded me of something that. If I could draw an analogy to music, for example, something that I am deeply passionate about myself, and songs that I like the best, I do the mental equivalent of sketching, which is close my eyes and imagine that I'm playing the song with the band, right? And since I have tortured the audience at Micah many times with our so-called little collective over there, not naming any names in case those guys are in respectable positions these days, all of them, by ruin others' careers and lives. No, but the thing is, once you close your eyes and picture yourself playing a particular song with the rest of the band, you're deeply aware of what all happens when certain segments come in, what the chemistry between, say, the bassist and the drummer is. And I think that brings that song to life in a way that it otherwise wouldn't have. Just like when you were saying, when you sketch, you notice all those little details and maybe you even see, I see what the architect was doing over there, clever bastard. I see what you did there, sort of thing. And you notice that the bird comes and rests in that particular zone, maybe because there's a certain covering or something. Maybe that's something the architect thought about or didn't. I think all that is deeply fascinating, and this is joy of just discovering it yourself, right? Rather than a tourist guy saying, hey, look up over there, those hooks are over there and those European buildings as for stuff to go up. And when you work it out yourself in your own head, I think that's...
And you attach a lot more value to it, no? The moment you've discovered it yourself.
Absolutely.
You're like, oh my God, I figured this out.
Yeah,
and absolutely. Even if the person who has done it smarter than you feel I'm so smart.
That's I read this article recently about a game designer who spoke about why QAnon, even though it sounds so ludicrous.
I think you shared this in Third Slip.
I did. I think that was fascinating. The whole I've figured it out myself, therefore it must be true. Oh, now there are others who found out we are all in the secret little
club people who have figured it out.
And of course, not at all rendered ludicrous by the fact that the to-be president is running a worldwide sex ring, but that's another story for another day, another podcast, I suppose. But Utsav, into Slow, how did you get into this? I've always been very curious about this. Like, is this something you consciously did? Something somebody inspired you to do?
No, I think I definitely did not consciously do it. I think again it came as a realization over time. Is that because whenever I used to travel for work. Right, I used to always take a couple of days off here and there, right? And when you just have, you're trying to squeeze 2 days from work, it's always rushed, no matter how relaxed you want to make it.
True.
And somehow those trips never seem very satisfying.
You always want to do everything, see everything. You're over there, so you might as well.
Like the only time I remembered having a 2-day or 3-day satisfying, really, really short work trip was when I was in Kenya and I got to go on the safari, but I was on the safari for 3 days.
Right.
So all I was doing all day was, either looking at animals or driving around because that was working at a very slow pace. Right. So what is happening is that I sort of came to the question that why am I not finding these trips to be satisfying? And what's happening is that I am seeing it so fast that I am literally checking off things in my list.
Yeah.
Right. And what happens with the checklist is that it gets done.
Yeah.
It doesn't get registered. Right. That's how we make work checklists, because we have to get things done most of the times.
Yeah.
Right. But whenever you need to write something of importance, in my case, it's writing, right? If it's an approach to a problem which I'm trying to solve, when I spend 3 to 4 hours uninterrupted with it, and when I write it, there is a very strong sense of registering what I have done and a strong sense of satisfaction of saying that I have put together something.
Yeah.
I think that the same thing comes with travel.
Yeah.
That you want those imprints to be there with you to say that, I have gone and felt that place. I'm not saying feeling from a very dreamy-eyed perspective, right? But for example, you cannot explain what Bombay is to someone without having lived there for a very long time.
Yeah, that's true.
If you live in Bombay for 6 months versus when I lived in Bombay for 10 years, I think I can explain someone to what Bombay is.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, we don't have the luxury of being in years in a place. But for example, when I lived in China for 6 months, and if I look at my own output of my China series on the podcast itself, right, to me, they were some of the most satisfying episodes.
Yeah.
Right. By the way, they also turned out to be some of the most popular episodes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So what happens is, because I got to look at a country closely for 6 months, even though for most part of it, I was just going into work and coming out at least 5 days a week.
Yeah.
But even during those interactions, looking at people in the canteen, taking the public transport, there were so many things I was noticing.
And
I
it's
was
compound
questioning.
effects, right?
It's compounding, absolutely. Right. And I could go back to my colleagues and say, hey, I saw this. What does this mean? And then they would just go back into a story telling me for 5 minutes that, I know this looks this much, but there is a huge story behind it. Right. And what happens is, over time, when you collect many such stories, you will start seeing connections and threads.
Yeah.
And that's what really makes travel amazing, because you uncover such sometimes sublime truths about places that, no travel writer probably has spoken about.
Yeah. What is it that drives us towards defaulting towards a checklist mode of travel? I mean, I'll be honest, if I'm planning out a next trip, then if I'm saying, okay, we're going to Europe, then we're like, oh, we got a Schengen visa, let's maximize the crap out of that baby and let's go everywhere we possibly can. And to some extent, that did happen when I went to Europe, but thankfully not to the point where we were planning every hour, every second and things like that. But why do you think it is that we tend to do that?
Because
scarcity?
No, I think it's because our entire life, we have been asked to maximize on everything.
Fair, yeah.
Right? You're supposed to maximize on salary, you're supposed to maximize on work, on personal relationships, right? And this is something which I learned a very unique way in when I had taken a sabbatical in 2018 for 3 months, and I spent a month at a wonderful cottage in the Himalayas. And that is when the equation really stuck to me, that we always think that happiness leads to satisfaction, but the equation is the other way around. It's satisfaction leads to happiness. And no one teaches this better than the people who live in the mountains. They live with the least amount, but they're the happiest people you will see.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what goes back to travel as well. I think what happens is that we are told that if we see more things, we will be happier, right? Which is why we try to maximize everything. We are just trying to say, okay, I will maximize experience. I will maximize materialism, right? But I think the point of life is not maximization.
Yeah.
Because there is no end to maximization. Right?
I mean, to what end? Then it just becomes a checklist for life as well, right?
Correct. So for example, I know I often read a lot of travel writing, and I see people who, youngest person to step foot in every country in the world. I am like, what did you achieve? Right? Because half of those countries you spent one day.
Sure. Yeah.
It's literally an airport touchdown in some countries.
Yeah.
Right. That sort of takes me back to the larger question of, maximization is an impossible, infinite state to achieve. Satisfaction is not. In fact, satisfaction is far more achievable than maximization. But we are not chasing that.
Yeah. And it's just a fundamental realization that people have to go through. I guess, this is a question I've grappled with myself many times. I'm guessing different people just have different sort of motivations. If somebody, if checklisting makes somebody happy, then sure, just go for it. Although I would encourage, try the other thing as well to see whether that's giving you even more happiness. And I'd like to think that everything eventually boils down to the amount of serotonin you have flushing around in your head. Not serotonin, serotonin only, right? No, dopamine.
Serotonin, endorphin, dopamine, whatever.
Around in your head, I mean, that's what everything boils down to eventually. And there are so many incredible stories around slow travel that you have, and I don't want to ask you to narrate them over here purely because I want people to go and listen to Postcards from Nowhere. It's an astonishing short format podcast, and I'll be very surprised if somebody's listening to this without having heard the podcast Postcards from Nowhere. What I love about that is, and I know you were skeptical about this when you started out as well, when you
absolutely
said, I want to start
full self-doubt.
Yeah. So self-doubt. And I'll rewind back to, the specific concerns I remember you having at that point of time, anyway, so you can feel a little better about yourself as well. When you came to me and said, so I remember distinctly, you came on to Simplified, and you said, and that was the time you were talking about either market research or the sabbatical.
No, we were talking about cheap ways to travel.
Cheap ways to travel. Yeah. So, and you said that you did have the idea of a travel show, or one of us suggested that you should do it because you were fairly articulate, you were passionate about travel, and you seemed very comfortable in front of a mic. And your first reaction to that was there are already so many travel shows out there. How would mine be different? But I think you've carved out a very nice niche for yourself. And I actually like to think that, you often say that, how do you describe your show?
Which part?
The beginning, the intro of your show, you have
a market researcher by profession and a slow traveler by passion.
No, there's another way you describe. There's another way you describe your show.
The strange, obscure, and fascinating parts.
You say this. Yeah, I've written it down. I was just searching for it while you were. While you say that in your promo for the show, you say that Postcards from Nowhere is a show that helps you travel better. Or give you tips on how to travel better. I'd say, Utsav, that it's a show that helps you live better.
Oh, wow. That is the best compliment I think I've ever got on the show. Thank you.
No, really. And I've noticed how the show has shifted from those slow travel experiences that you spoke about, right? Sketching, for instance, and your takeaway, the moral of the story, as it were, for you would be, just spend time, stop, zooming through life, exactly what you said, a few minutes back. But of late, it's shifted more towards how we see each other, culture, think about things a little more, and actually take more life lessons away from your latest series of shows as of Feb 2021. And I think that's a fascinating evolution that the show has happened. I don't know whether it's happened consciously or subconsciously, but it's just it's moved beyond just a travel podcast now. It's become, to me at least, and I don't know if it's just me feeling this way, to me it's become, sure, it starts off with a travel story, but then it ends with a very deep, profound life lesson by itself. And sometimes, there are times when I just stop and wow, that was a great, beautiful, scenic route to get to that destination, if you know what I mean. So I don't know if there's something you've planned consciously, and I'm glad you liked what I said about it. But but has this shift been conscious for you?
No. So I think I would be, giving myself too much credit if I were to say if this was a conscious shift. Mm-hmm. What happens is that with any creative process, right? It's as much as travel is. It's essentially again a process of discovery. Right now, let's face it. Podcasting in India is not at a space where you want to game the numbers. You cannot, because there are no numbers to game. But on a more serious note, what happens is that when you start creating, you start realizing what you enjoy creating. Right. And over time, even when I conceptualized the travel podcast, I somewhere knew it's not just going to be about only travel to A and how to do it better. But it's also going to be everything that makes that place. For example, the current series I'm doing is on alien landscapes, right?
Correct.
Now, I will not probably end up going to most of those places. Right. But what makes this place so unique is everything from its history to its culture, to its music, to its science, everything put together. And I think what has happened is it has helped me tell people that every episode is a way to slow travel. Right? There are no new destinations. There are just new ways of seeing. Right? And I am telling you about probably the most mundane things. But I'm saying, have you looked at this from a different lens? So rather than saying, in fact, and if you look at the first few episodes, I was trying to help someone create a toolkit. What I'm now trying to do is that I want to empower you to find your own narrative.
Wow.
Right? That is my fundamental thing now.
The 5 questions over here, the same thing for 30 years. Wow.
Right? So the only thing which I want to tell people is that there is no one right way to do anything. Certainly not travel. And you find your own unique way of traveling. And to me, that's what the show has evolved. The difference is that instead of giving direct tips, I just want to give you different perspectives. And say that maybe one of them will stick for you, or one of them will really, speak to you.
That's very interesting. And the reason I say also that it's I didn't say it just because it sounded like a nice tagline, that it's not just a show that helps you travel better, but a show that helps you live better, is that I've been consciously thinking about parts of this in my own life. There was this rush that I had, it's 2021, let me try to read at least 20 books this year for once. And then I realized, what is a number for the end? What does it achieve? And then I put myself in the shoes. I've started to get good at putting myself in the shoes of either success or failure, and then figuring out whether that's really worth it. At all. Okay, so you achieved that. You got to 20 books, 50 books, 100 books a year, but what did that really mean for you if you can't recall any of them for a substantial conversation later? Or is it just for, say, the social media kicks you get along the way, which I suspect is true for a lot of people who want to achieve, certain milestones. I have sort of got to the realization that it's probably better to just do one thing well rather than,
10 things.
10 things superficially for the sake of validation, I guess. And,
which I think I want to make a point here, and to those who don't know. So if you look at his email ID, it is Chuck of all trades. I think he has come from a different space to this point that I don't want to be Chuck of all trades.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
right? I just want to be maybe the master of 2-3 trades.
Yeah. It's I have to change I think 15-20-year-old email ID now, but yeah.
No. In fact, you should always keep it because it will keep you grounded to say that I have evolved from that point.
I have evolved from that. Yeah, Chuck once was of all trades or something like that. But yeah, and then you start filtering out what's really important to you, right? Be it travel or be it life. I guess there are so many analogies that we can draw there, which is why I can't think of individual stories right now because there's just so many. But I think the overall concept of slow travel, just slow down, breathe, like if you're listening to music, listen to it properly, close, or like this is a conscious decision that I've been doing of late. When I listen to music and I really get into music, I actually disconnect the internet from my computer because I download music via FLAC, so I don't need to be connected to Spotify or something. I just yank out my Ethernet cable. You have nowhere to go. You have no distractions, and then you realize how much that has to train you because your instinct is, okay, I'm just sitting here doing nothing but listening. And then your hand just reaches for, okay, let's just see if somebody has sent a mail. Let's see how the stocks are doing. Let's see how, like, this is like, let's see what's happening, what latest comedy is happening in US politics now. So, like, but when you hold yourself back, I think you're just doing the music also justice. And at the same time, you go and read the news properly when it's due. But there's so much to take out from there, Utsav, and this is why I really love the show. Now I want to sort of like blend the two together of sorts, like market research, travel, seemingly two completely different things, but at the same time also two very similar things. So I'm sure this is something that you've thought a lot about in terms of what the complementaries are, if there is such a word like that, and whether passion for one really fueled the other. I know that it has literally taken you to other places, like your stint in China, for instance. But apart from that, at a more fundamental level, has the passion for one really rubbed off on the other?
I think to some degree, yes. Because what tends to happen is that I cannot switch off either of them at any point in time. Mm-hmm. It's like, when you see something and you can't unsee it, right? For example, the Myntra logo controversy. Right? I did not see it till someone told me, oh, there is a problem with this logo, right? But there is not, but perspective. Sure. So what happens is that when I started traveling, I could not turn off my market research lens. I could not see why people are doing something.
Right.
When I started doing research, right, it gave me a great opportunity to travel. Whether it is traveling, to a chawl in Bombay, or it is traveling to Myanmar, or it is traveling to Kenya, right? So I don't think I can decouple them anymore. Mm-hmm. And to the most mathematically and mechanical engineering inclined people, I would like to bring to the fore the Navier-Stokes equation, which are coupled equations, right? And we have not learned enough math in the world to be able to actually solve them, right? So for me, it really comes from the fact that I cannot decouple them anymore. They are just sort of fusing together. And I find it a state of flow in that sense, that it is who I am actually in many ways. It's not a question of passion, or it's not a question of something I pursue, but it is a question of who Utsav is today, and the way he sees the world and the way he takes decisions. Is that?
Yeah. So it's amazing that starting from that, just fallen very nicely into two things that you completely enjoy in, both your professional and personal life in that sense. Utsav, for like, I know you are a quali guy.
I'm a quantity
guy. Sorry, quanti guy.
Oh my god! My god!
No, sorry. That makes things better, because I was going to say a but after that. Since I always think about whether you could put metrics to life or a vacation, like do you have anything like that that you think about, like if you had to, like these are the three things, these are the three. Instead of saying like maximize your vacation or something like that, would you have something like, I don't know, experiences per day or something like that you might want to take up? Because I have a feeling like you might, like I like how you started this entire segment by saying patience, for example. So have you ever thought about something like this? Because it definitely will not be attractions per day. Because that's something that you fundamentally don't believe in. But is there anything larger? Is there anything that people over here, suppose they're saying, all right, how do I get the most out of my vacation? If I had to put if they were so inclined towards numbers, is there anything, or is there a futile exercise if you try to quantify or work towards numbers for something that you're supposed to fundamentally enjoy? Is that something that can't happen?
Okay. Like everything, I cannot answer it in a straight way. So, okay. I'll give you a different example to this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's think of books.
Yeah.
Which are the most read books, or which are the books which are most liked? Are books which have a shelf life of centuries.
Sure.
Which stand a test of time.
Yeah.
Your only way to measure if you enjoy traveling should not be how excited you are about the place after you have come back,
mm-hmm.
but how excited are you to tell someone about it 1 year later.
Wonderful. It's amazing.
Because if you have really experienced the place, the high does not go away so easily. Of course, with time, every memory decays. That goes without saying.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But for me, if I have to still pick one place which has really, really inspired me, I would still say Patagonia in Argentina. And this was 5 years ago, at least 5-6
mm-hmm.
years ago. But I can still go on talking about Patagonia and Argentina with the same enthusiasm for half an hour in this podcast if I needed to. Because to me, that was some of the best travel experiences I have seen. Some of the most beautiful parts of the earth I've seen. And that is what stays with me, right? And I think that is the only metric with which you should measure it. And that's not quantifiable.
That's not quantifiable, yeah. But then you consciously try to put yourself in a situation where you have a memory or something to speak of, I guess, which I guess is easier said than it is done. But I think that's lovely. And I think the positive way of looking at that really is every unknown experience could lead to a story that you can say later. It's sort of like the McDonald's versus local restaurant thing, right? When you go to McDonald's, you know exactly what you're going to get. You're not likely to be disappointed. At the same time, you're not going to be elated over the moon or tell your friends about it. Apart from the fact that I went to Amsterdam and I was a stupid enough idiot to go and eat at a McDonald's over there. If that's a story. But when you go to a local restaurant, you might be thoroughly disappointed. You might wake up with diarrhea the next day, but at the same time, you're also more likely to have an amazing experience, an amazing waiter, make a couple of friends over there. I think that's is fabulous. And I know you didn't intend to, but ever since you told me about the concept of slow travel, it's something that I've consciously tried to apply in other parts of life as well. So I think it's a religion maybe that you should
a cult. I'm not into religion.
Or a cult.
I can only benefit from a cult. No one benefits from a religion.
Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough, except politicians perhaps, but let's not go down that very murky path. Utsav, I think that's pretty much about it with respect to what I wanted to ask you. I asked you a little bit about marketers, a little bit about travel, and we've kind of like had little bits of both in each of them. So thank you so much, man, for coming on to this. I had a thoroughly I was thoroughly entertained. I had to look at the time to remind myself that we are close to 1.5 hours of chatting. So thanks so much. And
but wait.
Yes, waiting.
I have a couple of things to talk about.
All right.
Okay. Now this is of course something which I have seen a lot more and thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Is the idea of, we talked about satisfaction.
Yeah.
But I think, and satisfaction somewhere comes with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're quite closely related.
Yeah.
And by all means, I think as the world and to a very large extent India also, a lot of people probably in their 20s, 30s are definitely going through some sort of a mental health challenge.
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah, especially now, right? So, and this is especially to everyone who is probably very, very invested in what they do for a living. Do not make your job your identity.
Mm.
For the very simple reason that when that goes down, it will take you down.
Down then, yeah.
Right. And the reason I bring it up specifically is because I sit very much on the side of my job being a very significant part of my identity, whereas you sit on the other side of having turned a freelancer, right, and dabbling in multiple projects, some for the kitchen, some for the soul, and so on and so forth, right. But I think the reason I talk about it is because it also goes back to the idea of slowing down.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that the moment you make any one particular thing your identity, you have ill-considered everything else that is a part of your life, right? So, and I'm saying, don't even make a relationship your identity.
Yeah.
Don't be someone's partner or someone's son or someone's father, whatever it is, right? Don't be Like, for example, one of the litmus tests you should take for yourself is that when someone asks you, what do you open with your job? Right? Because if you open and say that I manage 100 crores of media budgeted media agency, dude,
Wow, you take
things may not things may not look very good in the long term.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's sort of, to me, that has been one of the biggest realizations over time. Right? And this is coming from someone who absolutely loves his job.
Yeah.
Even after that, I don't want to make my job my sole identity. This is probably why my interest in travel, in personal passion projects, in excessively buying books and not reading them.
As a hobby. I think the Germans have a name for that.
But yeah, I'm sure the Germans have a name for it. It's either the Germans or the Japanese.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you can choose to edit all this out, by the way. I just thought.
No, this is great. No, I think this is. I think it's coming from somebody who loves their job. I think it makes it even more credible as advice, and this is true of anything, right? Like if don't put too many of your eggs in one basket is something that is 101 for any freelancer, really.
Yeah, and I mean, if it's good financial advice, why is it not good life advice?
Yeah. Oh, beautifully put. Yeah. If it's so, good financial advice equal to good travel advice equal to good life advice is something that I like to think, as long as it all goes back to first principles, which again goes back to that first thing that you said, right? Which is it's about understanding people, and when you start from there, you can have so many angles. You can have market research as a career, you can have travel as a hobby, you can have a podcast where you explore each of the intersection of each of these. I think that's fascinating when you go back to what is it that really drives you as a person. That's a great way to end, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You asked 2 weeks back why on earth I am calling you for this. I think once you hear the recording of this yourself, I think you would have answered that question.
I think let's leave it to the people who will listen to it.
All right, fair enough. Yeah.
Who will have because I will have my own biases, both for and against to what I think.
So for everyone who is listening and for some reason inexplicably does not listen, Utsav's show is called Postcards from Nowhere. I'll link out to that in the notes, and you will find it in any case on any podcast app of your choice. Utsav, any other destinations that people should be aware of?
Oh, we will need a podcast for that. But even after, I have my own podcast for it. But again, since we are in COVID times, wherever you go, don't hop places. Stay at one place for much longer. You are yourself safer. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Fair enough. I meant your individual destinations.
Oh, like my individual destinations
and things like that.
Okay. So my individual destinations, which I really looking forward to going to is...
No. Again, I meant your Twitter handle, as in like...
Oh, dude, shit. I'm so sorry. I think I travel about everything first.
Yes, I mean, this is how you're making travel your identity. Okay, let me answer for you. On Instagram, you are YB_Travel42. On Twitter, you are Utsav Mamoria.
Yeah, that's it.
That's about
Please don't add me on LinkedIn. Actually, I do sales. So I add everyone who accepts, because I'm like, kya pata, we will get a correction somewhere.
Eventually. Yeah, and I believe you can also find Utsav on Couchsurfing if you search enough. All right, Utsav, thanks so much once again. And one of my dreams is to one day do slow travel with you for a month. So here's to that happening sometime in the future when we are able to travel again. Otherwise, we will just open up Google Maps and we will stare at it together and notice how there are new restaurants popping up. That's the digital equivalent, I suppose. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this. And thank you once again, Utsav. All the links.
Thank you, Chuck, for having me on this.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hope you enjoyed that conversation. In the short journey of 100 episodes, I've been finally able to drop a manifesto for Postcards from Nowhere. The manifesto is inspired by the peerless travel writer, Barry Lopez. I had kept this private for a while, but I felt that I needed to share it with you, because it's you who makes everything possible. So here goes. In a world obsessed with speed, I have slowed down to see our planet. I experience the world intensely and then attempt to capture into words what I have seen. I see myself as a sort of a courier who comes home from another land after some exchange with it and its denizens, carrying by way of story some incomplete bit of news about how different, marvelous, and incomprehensible life is beyond the life we have accepted as our reality. Our culture and biological realities make it an attractive option to lose faith in the meaning of our lives when many of us see little more on the horizon but the suggestion of our dark future. in the Anthropocene or the era of the human, when we have become the sublime force. I travel slowly to notice people, cultures, their beliefs, and how they have shaped our past and how they will shape our future. I travel slowly to see nature, observing not on a timescale of months or years, but in decades and centuries, as they are meant to be seen. Postcards from Nowhere started off as an almost whimsical endeavor of documenting my travels. Over time, I found that my driving force is to equip people with a cognitive toolkit to see and experience the world differently. With slow travel as my conduit, my desire now is to influence people to discover a trajectory of their own life, their own coherent and meaningful story. I create stories to help people discover their own. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Utsav Memory on Twitter and YVTravel42 on Instagram.
Do you like true crime stories?
Do you like to learn about the people behind some horrible, awful crimes?
More specifically, women that may have committed these crimes.
Actually, Indian criminals that are women?
Then we'd like to welcome you to our podcast, Misconduct. My name is Raghavi.
And I am Nisha.
We cover themes like murder, dacoity, drug trafficking, financial fraud, kidnapping, and many more.
You can catch us every Wednesday on the IVM Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcast.
Season 3 of Echoes of India, your favorite history podcast, is back on the IVM Podcast Network. I'm your host, Anirudh Kanasetti. Join me on a journey through the wonders of early India as we explore the centuries between Buddha and Ashoka with critical research, empathy, and great storytelling. Along the way, you'll hear from all the vibrant peoples who shaped our world, from monks and farmers to warriors and emperors. New episodes are out every Monday.